This is Technically Legal, a podcast about legal technology, innovation in the legal industry, and the impact tech is having on the law. I'm Chad Main, the founder of legal services company Percipient, and on today's show, I'm having a conversation with Sebastian Niles. He's the Chief Legal Officer for Salesforce. We talk about his career path. We talk about how the legal department at the company is actually an accelerant to business and not a blocker. And we also discuss how Salesforce and other companies like it are ethically adopting AI. For a long time, for today's guest, the path was clear. Become a top lawyer, work at one of the best firms in the world, and advise the biggest companies. That's exactly what Sebastian Niles did at Wachtell, spending nearly 20 years at the firm mastering corporate strategy. But after almost a couple decades in private practice, Sebastian decided to take the jump and went in-house at Salesforce, where he's now the president and chief legal officer, leading one of the company's most critical functions in a world we all know that's being transformed by AI, and a transformation for which Salesforce is heavily involved. As those in legal know, with this fast pace of AI transformation, the challenge for legal departments is to keep up. But at Salesforce, Sebastian is going to fill us in how his legal team just doesn't keep up, they lead. My conversation today was recorded at the company's annual customer event out in San Francisco called Dreamforce. Among other things, Sebastian and I discuss his career journey, and he offers a couple tips for those aspiring to go in-house. We also talk about what it takes for a lawyer to move from being just an advisor to also being an accelerator of innovation and not a blocker of progress. Sebastian also fills us in how Salesforce, a global tech giant, embraces agentic AI, all the while ensuring it's used ethically. And finally, we find out why Sebastian thinks that trust is the propulsion for growth and how his team is building indispensable guardrails that make responsible AI possible. So, I think I read this right. Confirm if I'm wrong. In law school, you co-founded the Harvard Association for Law and Business. Is that correct?
That is correct. You've done your homework. That was some time ago.
I saw then you go to Wachtell, you're a summer associate, and then you get hired. And pre-Salesforce, your whole career is at that law firm, correct?
Correct.
So, and the reason I bring this up twofold, it's twofold questions. Number one, it seems like you were into business early on in law school. So you ultimately end up in business, but I feel like most people that get in-house, they go 4 or 5 years at the law firm and then they go in-house. You were here almost 2 decades, right?
That's right. Would have been 20 years.
Yeah. So what took you so long?
Makes me think back. But, the past
Yeah.
often does, right? It becomes a foundation for your future. If I think first that law and business element, an item for me, I've always been interested in the law and.
Right.
Law and corporate strategy, right? It's law and business, law and technology. It's actually funny. My mother had found, you remember, when you graduate high school, right? The newspapers say, oh, here are the different seniors. And so when the announcement was that I, joined Salesforce as president, chief legal officer, she found a clip. And the clip says, like, what I want to do. And it says, I want to be a high-tech corporate lawyer.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
And then I was like, aha, now people can think there was this whole, structured plan and step-by-step, even though this is not actually true. But it must have been in my subconscious somewhere. But to your question, though, is how do you kind of enter? Look, I think it is right. Because I was always interested in the law and pieces, when I joined, Wachtell Lipton, continued sort of that focus of, okay, how do you bring, and at Wachtell and is leading different practice groups, as a partner there and the like, working with clients, certainly in the technology industry, but really across industries, on issues where, either big opportunities they want to seize and manifest or de-risk, or yes, items that are really keeping them up at night, and really kind of across different sets, of areas. And in each of those kinds of interactions and advisory, I was often, one of the, partners, leaders, managers that would really want to go end to end with the client.
What do you mean by that, end to end?
Like, yes, there's always going to be some particular, right? What's the task? What's the matter? But I would always want to really understand, okay, what's the larger context, right? That GC, chief legal officer, that CEO, that CFO, that board of directors, what are we more broadly trying to achieve? And even if the particular matter, reached its natural end, I'd often just stay in touch, right? Or the client would stay in touch with me, continue to see, well, where did that go? It could have been a deal, right? In terms of, okay, what does that integration, go? Could have been a governance, right, matter. Could have been, a particular joint venture commercial agreement. Could be, merger acquisition. Could be an element of broader kind of stakeholder affairs or shareholder affairs. And just throughout all that, really kind of, caring for and spending time, with these companies or these investors, these governments, in that more, what's that full life cycle of what's most important to, right, that particular client, industry, team, and the like. And I think that also kind of just led me to, here at Salesforce, just, sort of this idea of, okay, well, I've, been blessed to really become a key trusted advisor, right, to, companies and contexts around the globe, to join a company whose number one value is trust. And in a very meaningful way, where trust at Salesforce is part of our operating system, right? It's how we think of the technology, it's how we think of, customer success. And I think when Salesforce, and I've been with customers all week, a number of customers have said to me, "Hey, Sebastian, when Salesforce is at its best, you guys are such a key partner. You are a trusted advisor to us as to how do we, right, kind of add that augmentation layer, right, or the agentic AI layer, but really kind of transform in a meaningful way." And so that's been a really interesting kind of throughput, right? That trusted advisor piece now at scale for us as a company, as an industry leader and in a broader Salesforce ecosystem. So, it's been a really kind of exciting and sometimes wild ride, and it's a real privilege to lead these teams and try to drive forward our priorities.
So I think you might have already answered it, at least in part. If someone's out there listening, they want to come in-house, what is the one thing you would tell them to do? Let's say they're a law firm right now. And then once they get in, how do they get to your role? How do they get to the top? How do they keep getting the promotions within the legal department?
Oh, what a terrific question. So, first of all, I really try not to give advice. I would say, though, first, if someone wants to, go in-house from whatever context there is, I'd say first, continue to really push yourself on your own self-awareness, right? What's your why for doing that, right? And then, in the corporate setting, we often talk about the 5 whys. You get your first answer, okay, why, to try to get to some more core elements of your purpose, of what energizes you, what kind of maybe saps your energy, what's kind of your broader context. I often say to my children, and my children come back to me reminding me of this, they say, "Hey, look, you can have everything you want in life, but not necessarily at exactly the same time." And so there's that element of self-awareness. Are you, open to growth and change and challenge, right? And feedback. And again, really kind of figuring out, obviously, hopefully, one's life is, kind of long and fulfilling. Your work, your profession ought to hopefully be a place where you are able to manifest some of your, deepest values. And really, though, figuring out, look, again, what makes you tick, what energizes you. Do you want to lead teams? Are you more of, kind of want to be an individual contributor? Are you kind of looking to figure out, okay, am I a leader? Am I a manager? Am I an individual contributor? But, then you gotta focus on the substance. So I think that's another piece, which I would just say is anything that you choose to do, if you approach it with, dedication, with discipline, and a real authentic seriousness of purpose, then yes, all contexts differ. But I think, you'll hopefully be tremendously successful and fulfill that you're having impact.
We need to do more with less. That is the key takeaway nowadays from almost every survey of in-house counsel. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if you actually could do more for less? By combining legal expertise and technology, Percipient enables legal teams to get more work done for less. Buried in contracts and sales is frustrated with turnaround time? We can help with that. Did you just get hit with a subpoena and reviewing 100,000 documents and files will tax your resources or cost you a small fortune in billable hours? We can help there too. Our team of legal professionals leverage tech and project management principles with the right amount of human oversight to deliver precise, efficient, and cost-effective legal solutions. Whether it's legal operations and contract management support, subpoena compliance, or document review, Percipient is your partner in really doing more for less. Percipient. Legal services powered by technology.
Right. Okay, so curious to know, I assume they do, if the legal team uses Salesforce and how they use it. Here's why I bring it up. I bring it up for 2 reasons. Number one is a few of our customers that we work with use Salesforce. So that's part of the process. And then we get involved as part of their process too. But also, I think so often legal departments overlook using the tools they already have at their disposal and that the business is already using. So how do you, at Salesforce, how do you use Salesforce internally in the legal department?
I think all of us, all departments at various points of time can overlook what's right in front of us, right? You know, it's actually a great question. Our customers worldwide, basically all of them of any size, right, are going to have these in-house, right, global legal departments, local. So many of our customers actually come to us to understand how are you building, right, sort of your global, legal operations, compliance operations, different sets of areas using technology on the Salesforce platform. Are you guys really being customer zero? Given that you do have the opportunity of, you've heard about it here at Dreamforce, right? Agentforce 360, the data 360. What does it mean to have a 360 view of your clients, of your customers, and your internal reimagining your operations, your workflows, and the like? And we're doing it. And the reason we're doing it is, one, we've built basically our entire outside counsel management platform on Salesforce, right? Number two, look, our incredible outside counsel, they're going to also have to start getting used to interacting with our outside counsel Agentforce AI agent that we built to sort of engage with them. We are also looking at so Slack. So if I take out my phone, and so we try at Salesforce, we try to run our whole business actually on Slack. And we have a section, right? That sort of when I sort of look at this here, right? I've got this agent force, right, section. And this is showing me like all these different agents that we've built that I have. I highlight this because we're using agents in our Slack channels for example, say our global distribution sales team. There are areas where we actually designed a process for them to kind of have a little bit of self-serve motion, talk to our legal agents about key areas, right? So that they are able to drive forward some of the key deals in different areas, and the like within our, sort of templates, right, that we've created. We believe very much that freedom within a framework, but you better give folks some frameworks, guardrails, and the like. And then that really frees up, right, some of the kind of, the core legal teams to be able to focus on less on the rote, right, items, less on the routine sets of items, but the areas that are going to have, sort of highest, sets of impact. So it's really across, it's the agents, it's across our apps, how we're bringing our data cloud, bringing together siloed data, fragmented data that we ourselves, experience or as a global legal department, as a company. How do we think of Slack? Also, this is the first Dreamforce where we created a legal track. So we had a professional service firm track, and then particularly for law firms, right? Sort of in-house sort of legal departments. And there, how we're sort of using Slack to create in a very secure manner new channels for companies to engage with their law firm, for example. And so just kind of all the above. And we're pushing it, right? We're getting a lot of feedback. I would say our global teams, including our, responsible AI teams, and the like, and sort of the legal teams and everything, we're very involved in how are we developing these solutions end to end? How are we bringing trust, right, by design, privacy, sort of security, all these kinds of considerations that you can imagine, particularly for lawyers and the broader legal profession, are really top of mind. And it's, sort of just why I think that if you can kind of crack the code in context, in professions, in departments that really grapple with and maybe stay up at night around issues of trust, risk, and ethics, you've probably cracked the code to really, manifest the agentic enterprise across any function and across like really any industry.
For the uninitiated, most of the listeners of the podcast will understand that, but to the uninitiated, explain what an AI agent is and agent force. Explain what that is to those that might not know what it is.
As we think of Agentforce and our Agentforce platform, we were the first company to really roll out and identify what would it mean to leapfrog to agentic AI type of systems. And really what agents are is to kind of evolve from, kind of existing sets of AI tools to really the real reasoning, right? To actually taking actions on behalf of, right, human direction, sort of in the different sets of goals, and then, drive, right, sort of the relevant, sets of outcomes. And so, we internally, right, sort of Salesforce, and then we do this with our customers too, is we said, okay, if you have these agents, right, developing these different sort of, workflows, driving forward items, sometimes merging almost like probabilistic, non-deterministic, right, set of elements with deterministic sort of workflows, well, we better be able to understand how are the humans working with AI, working with agents to drive stakeholder success. So we build an Agentforce command center to bring that governance, that visibility, right, the auditability, right, sort of around these sort of different sets of areas. And so the agents will be able to, again, like with outside counsel agents, outside counsel may have questions. How do the invoices, how do the billing practices work? Maybe they need to engage, right, sort of with our internal teams. Other areas would just be, if you have compliance, sort of sets of areas. So we have sort of a whole set of different kinds of agents that, again, work within the business logic, work within the various systems to just advance, right, with, human oversight, humans in the loop, the various sort of sets of goals. And I give a whole bunch of examples. That's sort of this, it's a leapfrog, so our customers say, this is actually a different way of approaching things. So you redesign workflows, you redesign processes where, okay, the human teams can focus on what is most impactful. Could be strategic work, could be high relationship work. It could be the more complex, right, judgment sort of, sort of heavy work. And then you can use AI and agentic tools to automate, to simplify, to amplify, and then to augment, right, the team. So it's really kind of working together to, drive sort of the relevant things forward. I think the other thing, which you asked me earlier, and I apologize, I didn't really come back to though, is, well, you say explain agents. What's the element of trust around it? So one thing that you developed here at Salesforce is sort of, okay, what does Agentforce trust really have to mean? And we said, this is about trusted agentics, right? Which is just a completely new concept, for Agentforce trust and agentics generally. And it's, well, one, how do you give customers the control, the compliance, the confidence to, right, develop, deploy, agents, at scale? But then also for us as like customer zero, how do we make sure we have the right guardrails, right, the right governance and the right guidance?
Explain that, because I've heard a bunch of times in your articles and today. Two things have stuck out to me: responsible adoption of AI
Yes.
and innovating ethically. I keep hearing guardrails. Explain what
Thank
you guys mean by that when you say guardrails. Create AI that has guardrails.
So one, the big picture point around trust is our strong view, my strong view, is that trust and innovation are not at odds, with each other. Our view, and we see this with our customers, we see this with ourselves, is that trust is actually an accelerant. It's propulsion to drive forward actual adoption of responsible innovation at scale, right? And so when we think of it, we think there's 5 components, of an agent. Guardrails are one of those components. What is it that the agent shouldn't do or can't do?
An example is, I saw one of the videos, if you've got a customer service agent, it shouldn't answer questions about going to space and Mars, right?
That's right. Yes, that's a guardrail. Let's create a context, right? What are the items it's not supposed to answer? What are the steps it's not supposed to take unless perhaps authorized by a human? So you again, in kind of our vision around these items is ultimately we're going to have multi sort of agents interacting with each other. So you need, interoperability, but guardrails is one component. Another one is, well, what's the job? What's the role that the agent is supposed to have? Another one is the tasks. What's the specific actions they're supposed to be able to do? Another one is channels. Where are they going to be operating? Is it in Slack? Is it on the phone? Right? Is it email? And then the last one, which is really critical, the data. What's the data, the information they're supposed to have access to? And so part of the guardrails with this overall kind of concept of trust and agentics is, okay, how do you make sure you have the agent and really sort of all of our AI solutions and broadly kind of sets of solutions be grounded on the right high quality data? And how do you make sure customers trust the data that they receive? How do we make sure that we're getting trusted data right from the customers to develop all of these, sort of different sets of items? And again, the guardrails are actually, I get especially passionate about the guardrails because that's, again, how you develop that freedom within a framework.
You're a lawyer. Of course you do. Which leads me to another question is, where does legal fit into this? Where does the legal department fit into this? Let's say you got a company, like a new emerging tech company, not as sophisticated, doesn't have as a sophisticated legal department as Salesforce. Where does legal fit in to the AI adoption and how the product team's using it? How just the Salesforce, no pun intended, how the sales team is using it?
So we have a vision as to what is the optimized global legal department in the agentic, enterprise. And, we've got incredible teams, sort of that are driving forward, this vision in a very highly collaborative way. Our view, around it is that legal is deeply embedded, right, sort of throughout all of these steps, actually of, sort of product design, product development, right, the deployment around these, set of areas, thinking about the risk mitigation as well as, the opportunity. A big picture area where, certainly our global legal department really focuses on is how do you calibrate opportunity and risk, right? And sort of just figuring out those, sets of areas so that it is, again, at every stage, bringing that trust But also when we sort of working with customers, we will sit with customers around how should they think about the issues of privacy, of security, of legal right sort of issues and risks. And that also gets them comfortable. But we're also like co-architecting
Right.
some of these solutions so that a global legal affairs team is actually an accelerant. And we really put to bed those sort of historic notions of a global
Department
legal
of No.
department
Like,
as
how do you get around that?
department of no, the blocker, but instead it's the, okay, hold on. Here are different options of how we're going to get there. Okay. Yes. Here's how. Or again, what are the different sort of trade-offs? The other thing that I think a global legal department really is able to do, if you've achieved to being a real trusted partner, right, throughout the organization, can be a super connector. Connect the dots actually across other functions, because a lot of issues and opportunities may come to us and we may sort of see it and be like, actually, hold on, maybe this function needs to get with this. Maybe we need to make sure our distribution sales teams have alignment with the technology and product teams. Maybe it should influence, right, the product features, the priorities. Which industries are we going into? Are we going at small business? Are we going to public sector? Are we going to enterprise? Is it medium commercial? And so I have a pretty, you can imagine, kind of forward-leaning, kind of concept of how a global legal department, again, can grapple and mitigate risk, but also drive forward growth, and opportunities. And again, I think because trust, I think, is a propulsion for innovation. If you set up scalable frameworks that, yes, have guardrails and, no, don't do this. Yes, you can do this. Everyone gets to move faster. It unlocks the potential of your people. It unlocks what's needed at your customers. And again, for us internally at the company, it lets us move a lot faster, less friction, fewer bottlenecks, and just actually kind of a lot more joy and collaboration for the teams.
Going hand in hand with this a little bit is regulation. Does it worry you that the tech moves so fast that regulators can't keep up with it? So when we've got new laws passed, that they may be behind the times. And if so, how do you, as a major tech company, help government stay on top of that?
So look, innovation is moving incredibly fast. I mean, candidly, we hear from customers, they're like, look, most sophisticated customers, they're like, we can't even keep up with, yes, what you guys are doing at Salesforce and Agentforce, but also the global, sort of rate of change. We do believe, and again, remember, we focus on business solutions, right? We're B2B. We're working with enterprises, small businesses, governments, and the like. I highlight that because the way we approach these issues is we are expected, and we embrace the idea, we have to uphold really high standards around trust, around privacy, around the guardrails. What is the technology supposed to do, and what is it sort of not supposed to do, and be responsible about it? So our view actually has always been, look, don't wait for some particular regulation or law to come in to drive you to be responsible in your development, deploy, and run. Not everyone necessarily thinks that way. We do think that this opportunity with agentic transformation AI calls for some fresh thinking and partnerships between governments, the private sector, and civil society. And, you need risk-based sets of approaches. You need to think about interoperability. But you also need, I was in Singapore, sort of this summer overseas with the teams, with our customers there. In there, this is one of the most innovative countries. I will tell you, they also have a very sophisticated view toward regulation, which is a humility. Because innovation in some ways is moving so fast, well, hold on. If we want to make sure we're creating an environment so that you can drive for this responsible innovation, let's make sure we don't have overly restrictive, right, laws or regimes. Let's instead really focus on the areas that maybe could be of most, just like you want to have specific use cases, right, the company may use. Okay, maybe there's specific types of issues that come up. Like you could imagine even here in the US, we're grappling right, with children, right? Okay, these are sort of a real key area. We need to come up, with some additional, right, sort of structures, frameworks, standards, and the like. I'm privileged to be a member of the American Law Institute, right? It's one of the oldest, right? So, it's, judges, academia, we have a few folks from the private sector. And one of the areas being worked through is how should we think about, right, legal frameworks for artificial intelligence, right, going forward. And it's incredibly stimulating, have teams, tackling that. And I've always tried to bring a little blend of, again, the law and it's like, is this sort of like theoretical, sort of pie in the sky professorial stuff? I'm like, I think this is deeply practical, and we need to get these frameworks right so that we can achieve and realize what I think are tremendous benefits of real modernization and adding these agentic augmentation layers, to all of us.
Sebastian, appreciate your time. Any closing thoughts?
So, thank you for having me. Hope you're having a terrific Dreamforce. And again, anything we can do, we love feedback.
Appreciate your time. Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on most major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. Also, if you like us enough, I hope you leave us a favorable review. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this has been Technically Legal.